Hello, people. How you doing? Want to make this video on this Thanksgiving Day and just get back. If I get the chance to watch the game, but in this video, I want to show you what Joseph from on the Shores of Giants says, and it's this video that from his other YouTube channel. Um, when this black minister says something crazy about black people didn't build nothing. Well, I'm gonna let you hear it, and I'm gonna show you that what this black pastor has said is a complete lie, biblically.
So poor. How could a place that holds trillions of dollars in rare minerals, gems, and other resources be so incredibly impoverished? And for many, the answer is simple enough. Africa is poor because of the legacy of colonialism. The narrative usually goes something like this. Europe's great powers invaded, conquered, and pillaged Africa of its raw resources, leaving the continent impoverished to this very day. Now, more than 60 years after the end of colonial rule, the continent is still struggling to overcome decades of exploitation at the hands of the European powers. It's a compelling narrative, and many people believe it. But the problem is, it doesn't seem to be telling the whole story, and here's the proof. Consider the story of another ex-colony that gained its independence around the same time as most African nations, Singapore.
Now, listen to this bullshit that he about to get into, right? Because he's trying to refute the fact that colonization destabilized Africa, even though we know it did. But you in the Midwest of Mississippi, I'm in Florida. Look, we on the brink of being cold. It's Florida cold right now. It's Florida cold. So, I feel sorry for y'all, but listen to this. So he's about to compare a continent that was colonized for over 400 years to a country that was colonized for a few, maybe a decade, maybe a few decades, and left alone. So remember that a whole continent that was colonized for over 400 years is being compared to a country that was colonized for maybe a few decades and left alone. Because Africa is still to this day being colonized and raped of his resources. Says that's where he's wrong. Colonialism, exactly. It hasn't ended in Africa. It hasn't, right? Hey man, look man, that's why I love my audience. We smart over here. But let's continue listening to the lies. Hold on. Let me let him say it.
You lying. You ain't never met Dr. Martin Luther King.
All that line.
Former British colony with virtually no natural resources has risen to become one of the wealthiest nations in the world. Today, Singapore is actually richer on a per capita basis than its former colonizer. So if colonialism doesn't tell the entire story there, is there anything else that can explain why Africa specifically is so poor? Well, one interesting factor is Africa's geography. The economist Thomas Sowell points out that
and when white people mention
When we get to the pastor.
some bullshit, but he about to blame it on geography and not white supremacy. White people be wildin', man. White supremacists be wild.
Geography has hindered the continent's development for centuries and continues to do so to this very day. For example, while Europe's long coastline and plentiful natural harbors helped to facilitate a strong maritime trade all the way back to classical antiquity, Africa has had...
But you got to remember when, True Pilgrim, you got to remember when the white folk first pulled up in Africa. When they first pulled up in Africa and started colonizing.
Few of these features. In fact, the continent actually has less coastline than Europe, despite the fact that it's much bigger. It has very few deep water ports, and with the exception of the Nile, none of Africa's major rivers are easily navigable all the way to the ocean. These geographical problems create huge challenges to trade in Africa, but geography is not destiny. Just look at Botswana. This sub-Saharan country has set records for economic growth despite being landlocked in the middle of the Kalahari Desert. While Botswana does have plenty of diamonds, it lacks many of the other major natural resources, rivers, or harbors that many of its neighbors do. And yet, Botswana is one of the richest nations in Africa with a strong and growing economy. The story of both Botswana and Singapore show that the true culprits behind Africa's persistent poverty has to be something else. Now consider this. In the Tanzanian Constitution in 1965, it discussed the government's role to, quote, prevent the accumulation of wealth to an extent which is inconsistent with the existence of a classless society. This Marxist sentiment was not unusual in sub-Saharan African governments post-colonialism. The bottom line is, many former colonies have not only overcome prior subjugation, but have thrived both politically and economically. But they all seem to have something in common. Instead of trading colonialism for marks, they adopted systems which encouraged private property rights while at the same time embracing stable governments which established dependable legal systems and then courted foreign investment. The good news is there is hope for countries still struggling to develop, but history suggests that it will come not only through political freedom, but economic freedom as well.
So it's some bullshit. True Pilgrim's comment is right on point. The pillaging of Africa never stopped. The European nations are still in control. Arabs came in, gained control. Even Asians came in, gained control over resources and things. What is he talking about? This is the blatant racism, the blatant lying that be happening right in front of our faces. Like we don't have information, like we don't read books. They really think we don't read. They think we can't read. I know a lot of Negroes be acting foolish and stuff, but we all don't behave like that, right? So it's a lot of us out here who got good minds, who can think and who can read and process information and understand what the hell is going on and what somebody is telling us and be able to say, that is some bullshit. That's some bullshit. What my man told him.
You ain't never met Dr. Martin Luther King.
Your ass is lying, Mr. White Man. You lying. Right? We know the main reasons why the continent is in disarray right now. It's the presence of colonization. We read destruction of black civilization. So now we're talking like a 6,000 year period that Chancellor Williams covered. We read that. I'm just saying. It was a big bank, take little bank. Yep. Well, see, if you look at the world through a white supremacist lens, O'Neal, my dear brother O'Neal, if you look at the world through a white supremacist lens.
Sorry, I just want to get. It's kind of long. Look what this fool said. I want you to see. Want to get this.
With Fire TV, there's no more searching. More time for you time.
Oh, these doggone commercials. Oh my goodness. We can get to the video already. Damn.
We gotta deal with this.
Oh my goodness. Damn, you two.
We won't challenge.
God dog.
In the next generation, GM's.
They worse than a doggone TV commercial on TV.
One day, but not yet. Lying. Destruction of black civilization. Because we were caught up in, like, I'm so glad we learned this history, but he gave solutions at the end. But what were the lessons that you learned from the book? And one of the greatest lessons that I got from it is when black people went away from our African Civil Code of Conduct, when we turned our backs on what we did as African people, that allowed the others to be able to come in and take it down. PhD, but how you doing? It's going down. It's going down. So Say you think you are an African? Come on, hey man, look, brother. Hey, agree to disagree. Agree to disagree. Hey, agree to disagree. I'm not getting into that. Call yourself what you want. I don't get into all that. We know history.
Before we get there, we need to hear some truth. Black people and white folk. Black people got a problem. And it's a God problem. When black people see the world, you can train them. You can train a black man to be a physician. You can train him to be an astrophysicist. You can train him to be a lawyer, but you can't train him to understand the world. He doesn't know. I'm telling you. There's not 2 cents worth of difference between a mass murderer. There's not 2 cents of difference between a petty thief that's locked away in prison than a black doctor when it comes to understanding the world. Listen. We got to deal with this. And we need to begin to acknowledge it, talk about it, ask God to help us, because only God can help black people where they are. Black people had Africa, that big old continent over there. They never built one boat that was seaworthy. Not one.
I got some for this one.
There's not one monument in Africa in
Oh,
all
really?
of Africa.
Oh, really?
I know you're talking about Egypt. Egypt is not Africa. There are no great cities that were built. Even before the first colonization of white people coming to the shores of Africa or the slave ships, black men built nothing. No sewer system, no houses above one level, and none of them made out of stone. All of them made out of grass and wood. Black men, before the white man ever got to Africa, the worst thing that could ever happen to South Africa was when they gave it to Nelson Mandela and black folk. That was a great nation. Now, notwithstanding apartheid was wrong, we all know it's wrong. I'm against it. There should have been some other resolution.
No, you're not.
And turning it over to Nelson Mandela. Disease, AIDS, and crime is running wild in Johannesburg. They're killing one another over there. They're dying of sickness. The government is mismanaged. The people who ran the nation are now leaving the nation because black folk don't know how to run no nation. They don't know how. And we need to admit it. I know you don't like it, but you need to stop shucking and jiving. We got a problem. Nigeria.
Let me stop this fool right here. One thing, he must don't study geopolitics. It was because certain individual leaders, because they don't understand. Some people don't understand how to negotiate, and some do sell their own people out, and that's the reason why they pillage. But there are African leaders are rethinking. Look at Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger. He don't even know what he's talking about. You know, you're going to indict the whole continent of Africa. Now it might be some problem in Nigeria, some stuff going on in Ghana, but not every country in Africa is the same. And black people and black men come something. Okay, sir, if you're gonna say something like that, why why was the Grecians and the Romans down there? Why did they take some of the scholars that come down to learn certain things that these black nations was able to form and take it to Rome, take it to Greece to learn some things? But these were dark melanated people that you don't, so you don't even know what you're talking about. And I'm about to show you that this food, you know, here he's a pastor and just getting all butthurt into his feeling. You know, he's not in confidence in own people. And this is the reason why black people, when it comes to pastors like this is why some want to leave the church, because of foolishness that's coming out of his mouth. He's that preacher that if he was back in the 1600s and we were all on plantations, he said, what them Negroes left the plantation for? They ain't gonna do nothing out there. You know, why don't you just be a better, productive person? And the people that was overseeing this, he probably descend from something like that. You know, this is ridiculous.
It's funny he say shucking and jiving, but notice everybody's judging the state of Africa after colonization. He is, the white guy did, and these coming up are going to do that. They're looking at Africa after colonization, and then because the dismissal is Africa didn't build anything before the white people got there. That's the dismissal, even though we know, like, there's definitive
Right.
evidence, like, still in Africa, like,
Right.
actual physical evidence.
And this Negro ain't been to Africa.
That existed before the white people got there, right? But according to this pastor, nothing happened. Seeing the world through white eyes,
Right.
right? But dancing for the white dollar.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely, Joseph. And I'm gonna prove that you're right. Anybody want to dispute that? Because this video is going, and it's shout out to this channel for pointing this out. So he said that black people didn't do something right. We didn't build no civilizations. All right, Mr. Pork Chop Pastor, let me tell you what's happening.
Administrative genius that fed nations. These are the works of Ham's house.
Let's start with the Bible and tell you the true Bible. But do you think Pastor Pork Chop understand this? This is in his word. Been a pastor for 25, 30 years, and you don't even know this shit? Watch this.
Party Jews from the Middle East and North Africa, but to recognize who held the levers at the founding and who defined the optic presented to the world. Thus, a paradox takes root. A state planted in the Middle East, yet clothed in European character. A nation claiming ancient lineage, yet projected through the faces and forms of modern Europe. The question presses harder now. If the land is Eastern and the scriptures Afro-Asiatic, how did the world come to see Israel through a European lens? What, then, became of those whose lineages and lifeways most closely mirror the ancient Near Eastern world of the Bible, the Beta Israel of Ethiopia, who remember a bond to Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, the African Hebrew Israelites who have guarded dietary laws, feast days, and communal discipline, and the Yemenite, Moroccan, and Iraqi Jews who preserved Semitic song, script, and Sabbath beneath Arab skies for centuries? When many of them reached the promised land in the 20th century, airlifted from famine and war zones, or arriving by ship and foot, they did not find a jubilant homecoming. Instead of being embraced as long-lost kin, they were processed as problems to be managed, absorbed into institutions that measured worth by proximity to European norms. Accent, dress, and devotional music were corrected. Names were standardized. Traditions labeled backward were trimmed away. The unspoken message was brutal in its simplicity. The closer you appear to Europe, the quicker you belong. For black Jews, this cut deepest. Beta Israel families who had carried Torah memory through the highlands of Gondar reported being shunted into peripheral towns, their children teased for their hair and hue, their elders sidelined in synagogues whose melodies felt foreign. The African Hebrew Israelites, devout, disciplined, and devoted to biblical law, faced years of residency battles and bureaucratic exclusion before piecemeal recognition arrived, a reminder that piety without European pedigree could still be questioned. Even among Mizrahi communities, Yemenite goldsmiths, Moroccan Paytanim, Iraqi scholars, assimilation carried a physical undertone. Journalists and researchers have documented periods when darker-skinned immigrants were encouraged toward correction. Archival testimonies describe subsidized cosmetic procedures, including rhinoplasty, promoted as tools of integration, and investigations in the 2000s reported that some Ethiopian women were given long-acting contraceptives without full, informed consent, prompting official directives to halt the practice. Each of these threads tells the same story, a hierarchy of belonging in which European features, accents, and aesthetics sit near the top, while Afro-Asiatic textures, skin, sound, and soul are treated as material to be managed. This is not merely a cultural preference. It is a moral wound. To demand that those who kept covenant under African suns refashion their faces, rename their children, and relearn their prayers is to deny the God who met Hagar in the desert and spoke to Moses from a bush blazing in Sinai's heat.
Attention network marketers. I have spent the past decade literally mentoring hundreds of top earners, helping them unlock the secrets of this.
Spoke to Moses from a bush blazing in Sinai's heat. Erasing the blackness of Israel is not just a policy error. It is a spiritual crime, a refusal to honor the image of God born visibly in the very people whose appearance most resembles the world of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Power in today's Israel has a color, and it is the pallor of Europe more than the bronze of the Bible. Look at the summit of politics and policy. The Prime Minister's chair, the senior ministries, the intelligence chiefs, the high court benches again and again. They are filled by Ashkenazi elites, whose families came from Warsaw, Vilna, Berlin, and Moscow, carrying with them the culture and networks of Europe into the heart of the Middle East. The pattern extends through the ranks of generals who shape doctrine and decide whose neighborhoods are patrolled and whose protests are tolerated, through media boards and cultural gatekeepers who decide what stories get told and which faces are considered Israel's face to the world. Meanwhile, in the streets below, black Jews march because they must, pleading not for privilege but for the baseline dignity their grandparents were promised when they came home. The names become landmarks in a painful geography. Solomon Teka, a teen of Ethiopian descent, shot and killed by an off-duty policeman. Damas Pakata, an Ethiopian-born soldier, beaten on camera while wearing the very uniform that vows to protect him. Each incident sparks demonstrations that echo with psalms and sirens, and each is met with official statements about isolated events that somehow never stay isolated. Schools ask children to assimilate upward toward European speech and aesthetics, while neighborhoods with darker skin tones absorb heavier policing and slower opportunities. The result is a hierarchy that whispers its theology without quoting a single verse, that the closer you are to Europe, the more credible your claim to covenant. The darker your skin, the more you must prove you belong. But covenant in Scripture is not awarded by phenotype. It is sealed by God and born in a people's obedience, suffering, and perseverance. If the patriarchs could blend into Egypt, and the prophets spoke from Afro-Asiatic hillsides, how did we arrive at a place where melanin becomes a measure of legitimacy? This is why the question refuses to die, why it rises like a prayer and an accusation in the same breath. If Abraham was a black man of the Afro-Asiatic world, why do those presented as his heirs look and rule like Europeans? If Israel's story was born under African suns, why do European hands still hold the pen that writes who gets to be Israel today? When the face of Israel is repainted, the script of Israel's destiny is reordered, and a people's path through history is made to look like someone else's footprints. Open Deuteronomy 28 and listen to the cadence of covenant, a chapter that names blessings for obedience and, with searing precision, curses for rebellion. It speaks of captivity in ships, of sons and daughters given to another people, of a yoke of iron upon the neck, of building houses yet not dwelling in them, planting vineyards yet not tasting their fruit, becoming a proverb and a byword among the nations, waking and lying down with terror in the heart and no assurance of life, and finally of a return to Egypt, in ships, where you would be sold to your enemies, and no man shall buy you, an idiom of utter devaluation. Who does that sound like? Whose story crosses the Atlantic in chains, whose lullabies were spirituals coated with hope and sorrow, whose prayers rose from hush arbors and cotton rows, whose children were auctioned, whose labor built empires yet left them houseless, landless, and mocked? Could it be that the heirs of this prophetic pattern are not seated in Tel Aviv's ministries but moving through Harlem's brownstones, Atlanta's sanctuaries, Detroit's factories, and Johannesburg's townships, also Kingston's hillsides and Bahia's shores, bearing in their bodies the marks of an ancient covenant, remembered in tears and songs? Israel, to whom pertaineth the adoption, and the glory, and the covenants. And the Spirit still asks, does covenant trace phenotype? Or does it surface in history's furnace, obedience tested, endurance proven, faith kept under the whip and the water cannon? If the curses read like your family's archive and the blessings sound like the future your grandmother prayed into your bones, then perhaps you are not a guest in the Bible's house, you are kin. Not to boast, not to exclude, but to awaken. Because if identity has been stolen, then restoration is not vanity. It is obedience returning to the God of Abraham with the humility of Micah 6-8 and the hope of Isaiah 61, ready for dry bones to rise as a living testimony that prophecy still speaks and God still keeps covenant. If you've made it this far, you now know the truth. And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. The original Israelites were black. The modern image of Israel was man-made. But the spiritual identity cannot be stolen because you are waking up. Drop 77 in the comments if this message stirred your soul. Like this video to push it out to others seeking truth. Share it with your family, your pastor, your community. And if you're ready to keep learning and unlearning, subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification bell. Pray with us. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the truth, for opening eyes and softening hearts. We pray for every viewer, black, white, or in between, who desires to know you in spirit and in truth. Let this message spark healing, not hate, restoration, not revenge. And may your true people rise, united in love, strong in purpose, ready for the return of the King. In the name of Yeshua the Messiah Jesus we pray. Amen. Until next time, remember who you are. Remember who you are. And stay tuned, because the truth is marching on.
Now, to people like Pastor Porkchop here, you think he's going to research that? You think he's going to tell his congregation something about this? No, because he is the descendant of men that were just like that plantation pastor that keep you on the plantation mentally. Talk down on these people. You ain't built nothing. You ain't trying to do something. But yet, the reason why it happened here in America.
On a humid day in June 2015, in McKinney, Texas, a group of black teenagers gathered at a suburban community pool to celebrate a birthday. The neighborhood, Craig Ranch, was known for its manicured lawns, strict homeowners' rules, and a quiet unease about who was considered a resident. That night, when the crowd of mostly black teens arrived, a few white neighbors began to complain. They said the kids were being loud and that they didn't belong there. Some reportedly shouted slurs and told the group to go back where they came from. And soon after, somebody called the police. Within minutes, several officers arrived. Most of the teenagers scattered, frightened. But the situation escalated when Officer Eric Casebolt, already tense after responding to 2 earlier calls that day, began shouting profanities and ordering the kids to the ground. Witnesses described his behavior as erratic. When 15-year-old Dejaria Becton, wearing an orange bikini, tried to walk away, Casebolt grabbed her by the arm, threw her to the pavement, and forced her face into the dirt. His knee pressed into her back as she screamed for her mother. 2 boys who rushed forward to help were met with Casebolt's drawn gun. The crowd froze, horrified, recording everything. The video spread like wildfire. Millions watched a terrified teenage girl pinned to the ground by a grown white man in uniform. Casebolt was placed on administrative leave and resigned 3 days later. Dejaria and her family later reached a settlement with the city, but no criminal charges were filed. Authorities said that while his behavior was indefensible, it did not meet the legal standard for prosecution under Texas law. Prosecutors claimed there wasn't enough evidence to prove that his use of force was unlawful beyond a reasonable doubt. For many, that very incident was another painful confirmation that accountability in America still depends on who you are, the color of your skin. Since then, many more stories have followed, each echoing the same imbalance. A black man shot for knocking on the wrong door. A woman arrested for asking a question during a traffic stop.
A teenager killed for playing music too loud. Each new headline feels like a continuation of the same story, repeating in different cities under different excuses. Incidents like this reveal what history so often tries to forget. The same racial order that once used segregation laws and lynching now operates through disturbance calls, stop and frisk tactics, and community policing that treats presence as threat. The names and methods evolve, but the logic remains. The control of black movement, freedom, and space. Yes, Jim Crow still lives in modern America. It no longer hangs signs that say, whites only, but it determines who feels welcome at a pool, who gets stopped on the road, who is followed through a store, and who is feared on sight. Stay with us now, because what follows is not a mere history lesson, but a revelation of how such an atrocious history was never buried. Once you see how Jim Crow has been rewritten into the very fabric of modern life, you'll understand why the struggle for justice in America is very much alive and ongoing. Subscribe to our channel if you're tired of sugar-coated history and want the actual truth, raw and unfiltered. Now, let's begin. Before we confront how Jim Crow still breathes in today's America, it's important to understand what it once was. The fact is, Jim Crow was never a single law or event. It was a full system of control built to replace slavery after the Civil War. Once emancipation threatened the South's old power structure, new laws appeared to keep that hierarchy intact. From the 1870s to the 1960s, segregation dictated nearly every part of black life, where people could live, work, learn, eat, and even sit. It was called separate but equal, but there was never really any equality. The purpose was to remind black Americans that freedom had limits, that they could serve society but not share in its power. The right to vote was stripped away through poll taxes, impossible literacy tests, and open intimidation. Black schools were left underfunded and overcrowded. Good jobs and fair wages were systematically denied. And when laws were not enough, terror made up the difference. The Ku Klux Klan and other white radicals lynched thousands of black men, women, and children between 1880 and 1950, public spectacles that newspapers covered like local festivals. Every headline carried the same warning. The system didn't need justice to keep control, only fear. Eventually, through immense courage and sacrifice, the civil rights movement forced the country to confront itself. Marchers were beaten and jailed, leaders were killed, but their struggle brought the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965.
If you can't quit the P word.
And this is why, as black Americans, we get offended when you got these other groups coming over here and saying you haven't done nothing. You haven't contributed nothing. And you don't know the whole story of our story. And they think that, well, it's not going to happen to me. You're benefiting off of it from coming from these different countries. But we know this system. It's been there for centuries and decades, And Pastor Pork Chop here decided that, he's like he's agreeing with the system. So he's okay with the system. He said, I think it's wrong. No, you don't think it's wrong to be apartheid because you wouldn't say some ridiculous stuff like that. Yeah, it wasn't perfect. It's a transition going out, but keeping people. Do you see, sir? Have you been to the continent of South Africa and talked with the blacks in South Africa and the trauma that they went through over there? Being apartheid, being beat with billy clubs and stuff like that. Can't go in certain townships, like he said in his video, to serve. And so-called maintaining, and all the people still, and there's a certain percentage of white people in white South Africa still got power. But you got Pastor Pork Chop here, probably never ever been to any of those countries and continent, but yet he sit back in his fancy apartment home, whatever, talking crap about black folk. It's just, people like that just make me mad. And then they're wondering why some people, this can turn people away. See, in the black community, we get somebody as a leader, they just want to say anything out their mind, and they tell it like it is because they had a platform and palladium, and people just sit there just right up under them, and they don't execute logic and they don't execute sense. They execute emotion. Then they want to so-called chastise you and correct you, and they're out of pocket, and they have an ego, and then they get puffed up when men put them up in position. That's what it is. They don't. Pastor Pork Chop here, does he ever help out the citizens in his own neighborhood? I mean, has he ever tried to correct the problem? Has he ever tried to contribute to understand why that there's black trauma in the black community? I'm not excusing what somebody's bad behavior is, but it's a lot of trauma and issues that stem from generations. Instead of us criticizing, why don't we take the time to understand why the black community is in the state that we in, sir? Why don't we understand what is it? And just rounding out the mouth, yeah, we know you, but all youth have rebellion. Black youth, white youth, Hispanic youth, every youth. It's not just black folks. And everybody rebel. You seen some poor white people rebel. That rebel and don't listen to law. And the law tries to show grace to them, and then unfortunately some officers get unalive by one of them. In a little rural small town somewhere. It's a question of character. We're so quick to blame each other, but we not quick to look overall what is the issue. It's rebellion is rebellion. Why are we so quick to come down on us, on each other? And then somebody say, "Hey man, as a country we live in a rebellious society for all races, walks of life. Someone's gonna rebel in something and break the law. Then you have the people that's in privileged position think that they're entitled to break the law, and they go out and do mass school shootings and everything, and other crazy stuff, mess with young people. I don't see Pastor Pork Chop talk about that, and they go out to any community, any kid. With a certain percentage of going out there and do that, even though there's weirdos and pedos in every community. I've seen in different communities, but who holds the most? But Pastor Pork Chop here don't want to address that. But to say that black people didn't build something, you have to go back and if that was the case, why did the Grecians come down to learn Egyptian? In Egypt, if you would read his Bible, and Cush means black, they built civilizations. Actually, they literally built a dynasty over there. It's just the sands and stuff that covered over time. That they uncovered things. They still uncovering things. The only thing they is trying to do is what some of the geologists trying to do is lighten up those carvings down there under the stone. Just make it seem like they were lighter than what they was. Well, everybody know who the true black Egyptians was. The Cush was. And he's been hoodwinked. He's taught to keep the Negro down. And that's why, I heard what Phil Scott said on his Avoid Africa, Go Back, I forgot, it's the African diaspora. He said we need to get a hold of that black pastor and that politician. That's what black people need to do. And I see why he said that. Because, they're the main one, some of these ones is the main one that kept black people in bondage. They don't know the truth. Maybe if they will see a channel like the one Black Journals or one of these other channels, they will look at themselves in a different light. Maybe it will change who they really are. That what God intended them to be, not what the United States, not what the press says, and the same people that run the organization say, yeah, go ahead, you guys. I like that jig that you guys do, and they make millions, and they get one person, and they dumb down black people, all like the sagging pants, all the degenerate was orchestrated by the ones in higher hierarchy, from the time of controlling history to the time they had their hands in it, erasing us. Then, a couple centuries later, about centuries later, and decades and centuries later, they make the same people look like a fool. And then they replace them and say they can't be these people because they don't have the creativity. Because they'll show, unfortunately, they keep the Democratic Party, which is the politician, and whatever sellout can do to keep them down so we can rise up. That's what it is. And Negroes like that, that's the reason why black people are the way in position at the end. Because maybe some black people, I'm not aware of who they are. But some are coming up out of it. Now, some choose going to be in ignorance, then they're going to perish in ignorance. But it's a good percentage of black people going to come up out of it. I have faith in the black people. I mean, there was good and bad during the time of Moses and Abraham. There's good and bad in the time of our time right now. You know, some didn't want to follow Moses. They didn't want to follow. People didn't want to follow the Bible patriarch. What happened? You tell your story about Korah. What happened to him? He wanted to be his own person. They got in an argument in the desert. What happened? He didn't want to listen to Moses because how are you eloquent to go and speak before this God of yours? And so the God heard that and told Moses to step back. And they down their internal hell to this day because they rebelled against Moses. And some people gonna rebel with other nations, but the ones who do, some of us, the Most High giving us the black man and black woman chance to get the act together. Trust me, before He bring us back to the top. I do believe that. Because what this other group have done, they still trying to erase and try to deny and try to use their weapons of media and other things to try to keep black people out of existence, keep them make them think that they monkeys in the jungle or something like that. That they don't have no creativity. If you ever think about that, then you help them keep that narrative. And even saying some stupid stuff like that. And when these people, during the time of Christ and after Christ and before Christ, these people, the Alexander Great, that come from Greece, and these other people saw what Egyptians, what the dark black Egyptians and Cush people were doing, and they wondered where did they learn to get their math from? Where did they learn who built these stones? Pastor. They wanted to make irrigation system. They solved the math problem. Was black Egyptians, not the Arabs you see over there. And it was part of Africa. It was part of it. Israel was just a stint of it. But it's up to him. He don't do no history. See, you're going to teach the Bible. They need to tell the whole history of it. And that's why there's some black people, they're dumb because they ain't pastors. They pastors say sometimes you have to step outside of your pastor to see where God show you what He wants to show you. When Jesus want to lead you, when you want to lead, because you don't know, people can be in bondage, but as an individual, you can go further if you desire to know the Father. He don't stop you for no limit in knowing the truth. In what happened in the past, to be a better person in the present. So, yeah, don't believe that crap, And like I said, only people, you might just side with the white supremacists that got that bull crap knowledge. They tell what people, they didn't make anything, and if they didn't think anything, why are there writings out there that how they had to come down and learn from the black Egyptians, the Cushites and these other people that built these cities and wonder how did they form this? But they didn't, in Mali and different other places. And then how other people construct them and dumb them down. Before you start condemning them countries in Africa, go do some research. and understand what political corruption, why they pay certain things. It's everything, and that's why it came unstable. So people with its instability, no matter if it's in the Middle East or somewhere, and you get them down, people turn into they go a different way. But anyway, all right then, ladies and gentlemen, I didn't want to make this video too long, but yeah, that's the reason why. And Phil was absolutely right. That's why we held back, and we listen to these people like that, and we think that they're the man of God, but they're supposed to be, but they're supposed to be picking up his wisdom from the spirit, not from the flesh. Take care, be blessed, see you on the next video.